I guess we just start off right off the bat with how the heck did that even happen? How did you get in there? How did you start working for WWF as the Raw commentator?
You know, it's the way the business works. You know, you kind of fall into things through the back door for some reason. That's how I ended up on Broadway. It's how I ended up getting on Law and Order, and then, you know, Good Wife and Elementary, and you know, it's just weird that it's, I guess, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, or in the case of the WWF, as it was in those days, in the wrong place at the right time. I was doing a benefit for Connecticut Special Olympics. I did 31 years as a writer and a performer, doing characters and stuff on the Imus in the morning show. And we were simulcast on MSNBC for a long time. And then we were simulcast for a brief time on RFD. It was us and like cattle auctions were the programming, basically. And I'm not joking. Us, cattle auctions, and polka shows. And then eventually Fox Business picked us up. And so we were there for a while. But I was with him when he first, when he was still back at WNBC. And then when we moved to WFAN. And then after the firing from the quote unquote, as we like to call it, the incident, we moved over to Fox and ABC, WABC. And Imus was very involved in Connecticut Special Olympics because one of his best friends, Mike Lupica, his wife Taylor, was really involved in Connecticut Special Olympics. She used to chair a lot of the things, and she would do a lot of fundraisers. And Imus would always attend, and he'd always ask if, you know, I would join him, and so they kind of depended on me to, you know, provide the entertainment. And more often than not, I was an auctioneer at these charity events. And I had this great strategy where I would get these rich Wall Street guys bidding on one item against each other. And then I would go to whoever donated the item and plead them to maybe be generous enough to donate a second one. And then that way, each guy could get it for whatever the last bid was, and they would double the. So I made a lot of money for them, which was great. The only time I kind of backfired was when I did one for, I think it was Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Donald Trump was in the audience. But it was the same night that Bill Clinton was a surprise guest speaker, and Trump already was not in a good mood because he immediately was no longer the most important person in the room. But then when I did the auction, he donated a foursome of golf with him on his golf course. And again, got two Wall Street guys bidding against each other. And I did say, Mr. Trump, would you mind adding another one? And he was not happy with that. He was not happy with me. I got a picture of him with Bill Clinton talking to me and Trump in the back. He's just beside himself. Anyway, just little anecdotal things trying to make this story a lot more interesting than it really is. I was doing this benefit. It was a, you know, a dinner in some tent up in Connecticut. I think it was Stamford, you know, 500 people. And I was emceeing and doing the auction. And Vince McMahon and his wife were sitting at the front table. And Vince was wearing a 3-piece peach-colored velour tuxedo. And I must have done about 20 minutes on just what he was wearing. Just murdered him, and the crowd went wild. And so everything was fine, whatever. And a couple of days later, I'm driving home from the radio, and Imus's assistant calls and said, Vince McMahon just called the office. He wants to speak to you. I was, oh no, that's it. He's putting a hit out on me. And so I call him back, and he says, Bartlett, how'd you like to be on live television? I'm doing this new show called Monday Night Raw, and I think you might be able to be a good part of it. I want it to be irreverent. I want it to be on the edge. I want it to be, you know, dangerous. You know, you're very good spontaneously. I said, sure. My son at the time, I guess, was 8 or 9, and he was totally into wrestling. I didn't really know much about it other than I took Sean to see Randy and Miss Elizabeth get married at that event. Yep. And I said, yeah, and showed up a couple of weeks later up in Stamford. And I met with Vince and Randy Savage. And we kind of had like a little bit of a meeting. And then we started doing these mock trial runs with tape, how it was going to go. and it looked like it could be an interesting mix, and I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time because as has been oft noted and many times repeated, it was not the greatest thing I've ever done in terms of, and I think part of the problem with that was, although it might have been a good idea to have somebody as an outsider come in to provide a different perspective, it's kind of hard to be funny when, even though it's really serious, the what you're making fun of is already larger than life. It's like putting a hat on a hat. So it didn't really make sense because the kind of humor that they did was very different than the kind of humor I did. And, humor, quote unquote humor, depends on your point of view. And so what I was doing, although in theory it was a good idea, talk about what was going on in current events and stuff like that, it just didn't, it was like trying to, shove a square peg in a round hole. It just really didn't fit. And, Randy could not have been nicer, more welcoming, more giving, more supportive, just a sweetheart of a man, just a real true gentleman, a total pro. Same thing with Bobby Heenan when I worked with him that one night when I imitated Vince and met him, at some of the shows, especially the first show when he dressed up like my aunt and my rabbi, because Vince for some reason thought I was Jewish. I don't know why. And Kevin Dunn, the producer, just totally wonderful, like salt of the earth, cream of the crop kind of people. Really just total pros, very supportive, would go out of their way to do anything to try and help me along and make it work. But it was like, moving the boulder up the hill, you get it on the top and just when you think, it just rolls back down again. So.